Hey everyone, Nvidia and Microsoft are arguably two of the companies that have benefited the most from the rising effectiveness of artificial intelligence. Nvidia, because many of these companies that are implementing and training these large language models are using its graphic processing units. Microsoft, because it made a large investment in OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, and is integrating those large language models into its suite of products that's implementing higher effectiveness for its productivity suite. So in this video, I'll compare the two. I'll look at their revenue, their operating profit, their cash flow, and I'll weigh it and compare their valuation difference and answer which one I think is the better AI stock to buy today. So let's get started with revenue. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. All right, over the last decade, you'll notice that Nvidia and Microsoft have grown their revenue significantly. Starting with Microsoft, where its revenue was roughly $80 billion in a trailing 12-month period in 2015, it's now grown to more than 3x, up to $236 billion. Nvidia, meanwhile, its revenue has jumped up to $80 billion, where in 2015 it was roughly around $1 billion. So Nvidia's revenue growth has been much more explosive than that of Microsoft, which increased from $80 billion to $240 billion. But Microsoft's total revenue growth, if you look at not percentage but just total revenue, at $160 billion, its growth over the last decade is still twice the magnitude of Nvidia's total trailing 12-month revenue. And that just gives you the size differential between Microsoft and Nvidia. As explosive as Nvidia has been, it still hasn't caught up. It's still roughly 1/3 of a trailing 12-month revenue compared to Microsoft. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if over the next 12 months, Nvidia closes this gap even further. And over the next 2 years or 3 years, I wouldn't be surprised if Nvidia catches Microsoft in total trailing 12-month revenue, if its position continues to remain as it is in the development of artificial intelligence. Also, impressively, Microsoft and Nvidia have grown their operating profit margin over the last decade. Nvidia has increased its operating profit margin all the way up to 59.84%. That's up from under 20% in 2015. So Nvidia has roughly tripled its operating profit margin in this decade. And that's an impressive demonstration of economies in scale. That's where your revenue grows, but your costs do not grow as much as revenue grows, and thereby creates a bigger difference between your revenue and expense, which leaves more profit on the bottom line for investors. Microsoft, too, has done a solid job in this. Its operating margin has increased from roughly 30% up to 44.7% in the most recent trailing 12-month period. Microsoft's growth has been more linear, whereas Nvidia's growth has been more exponential, especially in the last year and a half, as the rising effectiveness of AI has really put a fire under Nvidia's growth. The next area for comparison is cash flow from operations to sales over a trailing 12-month period. And similar to operating profit margin, they've both demonstrated nice increase in this metric. Nvidia's cash flow from operations to sales jumping to 50%. Microsoft's up to 46.5%. Those are both up from much lower levels a decade ago. Now, Nvidia and Microsoft have different business models. Nvidia generates most of its revenue by designing and then outsourcing the manufacturing of its GPUs and then selling that to its clients. Microsoft generates most of its revenue from software, things like Microsoft Windows and its 365 productivity suite. It's also got a robust cloud business, and so its revenue is more cloud-based, whereas its revenue is more software-based, whereas Nvidia's revenue is more hardware-based. Now, Nvidia does incorporate software into its hardware sales, and that's what makes its product even more competitively advantageous versus its rivals. It's because of the software advantage Nvidia has over rival GPUs. Still, Nvidia relies on those hardware sales more so than Microsoft does. Microsoft relies on hardware sales, but not its own hardware sales, right? Microsoft relies on some of the personal computing industry participants and their growth in rising personal computer sales, and that helps licensing sales for Microsoft and its productivity suite and its Windows operating license. So they're both incredibly profitable. As you'll notice here, 50% or near 50% cash flow from operations to sales is among the best of the best, are roughly around 70%. And so if you're at 50%, you're really, really strong. But those companies at 70% do not generate anywhere near as much revenue as Microsoft and Nvidia do, or generate this kind of growth. So at scale and with growth, this is among the best you'll see in terms of cash flow from operations to sales, and it's another good sign that they're both moving in the upward direction. Now, looking ahead, if I was to forecast the next 2 years in terms of revenue, profit, and cash flow, it's clear that Nvidia will do better in these metrics in terms of the growth of those metrics over the next 2 years. And the reason I say it's clear is because Nvidia has signaled that for the rest of the year, it has more demand than it has supply, and it's increasing supply. And then it also signaled that next year, with its next generation technology, the Blackwell that's coming out at the end of this year, and sales will really ramp next year, that is also supply constrained, where demand is exceeding supply. So at least for the next 2 years, we have visibility into Nvidia's sales prospects, and they look very strong. And Nvidia's sales, remember, are coming with these very high profit margins, over 60% in terms of gross profit margin. So we can see that Nvidia's growth is excellent. Microsoft also will grow nicely, although nowhere near the rate of Nvidia, at least over the next 2 years. And then longer term, over the next 5 to 10 years, also I think Nvidia's growth will outpace Microsoft. Although the rate of difference between the growth rates of Nvidia and Microsoft will be the largest over the next 2 years and will narrow over the next 5 years and then over the next decade from the year 5 to year 10. I wouldn't be surprised if their growth rates converge as Nvidia's surging sales over these next couple of years kind of slow down a bit and it kind of settles at that higher rate of revenue. And finally, I wanted to compare these two on valuation, and measuring by the forward price to earnings, Nvidia is slightly more expensive at a forward PE of 37.75 and Microsoft at a forward PE of 33.67. And given that Nvidia's business is absolutely thriving right now and in the previous 24 months, and given its competitive advantages and the forecasts over the next 24 months, if I had to pick between these two AI stocks today, I would pick Nvidia. I think Nvidia deserves this premium over Microsoft. I think they're both excellent stocks. I have both rated as buys, but I rank Nvidia stock higher than I rank Microsoft stock. Did you know that over 90% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed? It'll really help support my channel if you hit that subscribe button. And oh, by the way, one of the benefits of being subscribed is that I take requests from subscribers more often than I do from non-subscribers. So if you prefer that benefit, please subscribe to the channel.